welcome to day 4 of the 12 days of LiDAR. My name's Alex Bilk, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about LiDAR viewers. So let's recap. Up till now, you've learned LiDAR lingo, you understand basic derivatives, and now you understand LiDAR classes. Let's explore how to open some data. Before I start opening some of these viewers, a couple of notes. One is that while I'm trying to render this at a high resolution, it's very challenging for streaming software to capture what's going on in these software really accurately. I'm going to try to not move around as much. I noticed in the last video that was a bit of a challenge where you were getting some difficulty following what's going on along in point cloud. So I'm going to try to do my best to make sure that that doesn't happen. But also, yeah, you're encouraged to just try this on your own. So I'm hoping to give you the tools, and then you can try and check this out. So with that, let's get started. All of the software that I'm going to be showing you today for LiDAR viewers are all free, and you can explore them. Some are open source, some are not, but they are all free to use. So we're going to be starting with Cloud Compare, then we're going to go to Fugo Viewer, LastLook, and POTRE Desktop. I'll be giving you a very brief intro to LastLook. We're going to talk about that a lot more when we're talking about LAST tools in depth. So this is a very brief overview, but the rest we'll take a look at. So let's start with Cloud Compare. So Cloud Compare is a lot more than just a viewer. It has the capability of doing a lot of analytical work. It can be extended pretty extensively using a series of plugins. But when you drag and drop a file into this, you're going to be asked to basically about the projection information, and then it'll load in. And this is what it looked like in this case. And you see that it is actually looks kind of similar to what we looked at last time. The longer you let it sit, the more points it will draw in. But when you click on your LAZ file here, you can change the colors. It's going to default to RGB if you have them. So there's the RGB version of it, and that looks quite crisp actually. So we can zoom down and see exactly what's going on. And moving around in 3 dimensions does take a little bit of getting used to, but you'll get used to it. But you can change the colors from that to a scalar field. And what that means is it's going to read one of the fields within the LAS file and display the attributes accordingly. That is found down here where we see right now it's active on classification. I could move it to intensity. And again, we'll just zoom back out so you can start to see what this looks like. So we could view it by intensity. We could view it by return number, which gets messy. We could view it by scan angle if we wanted to. And we can view it by classification, among others. Now you might be looking at this and saying, well, what does that color mean? If you want to see a legend, you go to Display, Active Scalar Field, and say Toggle Color Scale. And that's going to give you an idea of what all these values are. So now if I go back to scan angle, then it actually changes and populates and tells you what's going on there. Again, it gets pretty messy pretty quickly, so I'm going to leave it on classification. It's not perfect, but as a viewer, it's pretty reasonable. We can change the color scale down here. We could apply any number of different color scales, so that works. If you hold down the Shift button and you click, then you can actually find what the scalar value is for that particular point, so you can see that it is class 5. So this is a reasonable viewer. Like I said, it can be extended a lot. There's a lot more to Cloud Compare than just being a simple viewer. Highly recommend you check out the website and look at the tutorials if you're interested. But that's all we're going to cover on it for now, because it's not my go-to. I need to quickly inspect data and use it as a viewer tool. It's just not. It has other functions. That's not really the one for me. So I'm going to close this, and I'm sure I want to quit. And we'll move on. Alright, so the next viewer we're going to look at is called Fugo Viewer. The link for it is provided here, and there's a little form you fill out, and then you get access to it. And I really like Fugo Viewer. I keep it on my system, and it's one that if I have some data I really just want to check out really quickly, I use this probably at least once or twice a week, honestly. It's a great lightweight viewer. It doesn't require a lot of space, and it doesn't create a lot of hassle in file management. So what I'm going to do is add the same colorized point cloud that we've been looking at, And what's nice with Fugo Viewer is it doesn't create any ancillary support files or anything else. So you add the LAS or the LAZ file, and it just opens it and it lets you take a look. So we'll give it a second here to load up. The biggest issue that I've run into with this particular viewer is sometimes it runs out of space. It can't deal with really dense point clouds or really large ones. So it'll ask you if it can decimate it. But that's not usually a problem. I'm using this not for any kind of analytical work, but just as a viewing tool. All right, here we go. So we get an impression of what's going on here, and that's because it defaults to this sort of earth tone. I can turn it here, and it's now going to be displaying by elevation, here by classification. So that's a little bit easier. And you see that it's not loading every single point. It's loading a portion of them in, but we get an impression that, yeah, things are looking pretty decent. The reason that I use this tool so much is two things. One, you can go to 3D view, which lets you manipulate the point cloud here the same way as we've been doing and be able to check things out. But more importantly is it lets me very quickly create these side profiles. So you see that that's what it looks like there. And I'm going to move my scroll wheel and it's going to jump around and slowly move through the data set and give us an idea of what's going on in that cross section. And that can be very useful to understand, what my understory looks like, all kinds of things. You can actually set it so that that profile box has a very static width, because if you're wanting to check, say, understory, if you're 10 meters wide, that's pretty big. Let's make it 3. There we go. And we can see everything that's going on with the data set here and just keep rolling on. And I like that it has all the different views here. We could also view this by RGB, so I could go here and change it so that the embedded RGB values are there. So again, lots of capacity to read the information easily and quickly. We could use the query tool here and get a sense of the XYZ, the intensity, how many returns, what its number was, that sort of thing. If we go to class and we click on it, then we can see which class it is. So you see that there's a lot of information that we can get out of this very quickly. So I like that. Very easy to understand my data without having to do anything too complicated. You can actually bring in additional photos if you wanted to. So I could say open up open a reference file here if I wanted to. I'm not going to at this point, but I could. So I like that. It's a handy tool. And then I'm going to just go into here for the tin tools. So this takes a second. So it defaults to showing you the ground. So this is sort of a DEM view of things. It's trying to fill in the gaps there. But we can actually adjust what this is showing us. So right now I'm going to turn all of them on. And I'm going to use the color palette of the RGB encode. Let's see what happens. Takes a second there. But now what it's done is it's basically drawn a surface from every one of those points and created a triangulated irregular network. Not perfect, obviously, but an interesting way to view your data sets and be able to identify what's going on. So I encourage you to check out Fugo Viewer. Costs you nothing to be able to do so. You can also take lightweight measurements if you want to, so it's always handy as well. And that's basically it. It's just a good way to be able to check in on your files quickly and see what's going on. The next one we're going to look at is called LastLook, and I have 2 links here. The first one is how you download the software, and the second one actually explains the setup, and there are a few steps for setup that you do need to follow. Because you need to install Last tools, and then you need to point the viewer to where those tools are located so that you can actually use them. So I'm going to open up LastLook here. Just give me a moment. And then here we go. So I'm going to just move my directory over And I'm just going to point us to my test folder here. Data. And here we go. So it shows us all of the LiDAR files within this folder, gives us an idea of the size, when it was created, the different information about it, the version numbers, all kinds of different things are available to us here. And we get a little tiny preview. And what we have to do is actually click on Show All Data to be able to see the whole thing. Minute. Now I have found this one doesn't like the streaming software the most, so hopefully it's going to behave. But if we run into any issues, it is more related to that than anything else. All right. So again, we can change things. You're kind of getting the same tone of things as before. So we can look at the classification and colorize our point cloud that way. We can look at it by intensity. But this tool is a little bit slower. You see, it's taking it some more time to compute things. It does fill in more gaps than we were looking at previously in Fugo Viewer. So that's that trade-off of if you're using all of the points, it takes longer to draw them. Let's go back to our classification. All right. So we've got the ability to, again, query all kinds of information here. It's a lightweight viewer. The power of this, I'm going to talk a lot more when I talk about LastTools, because they've designed this to be an interface so that you can actually interact with the LastTools suite of tools right within this interface. So you don't have to jump to command prompt. They're trying to remove some of those barriers to entry. So it is a good tool set for that. I'll be honest though, this is not something that I use very often. I find it a little bit slower than any of the other viewer solutions that I've found, and just a little bit too complex. If I want to get quick information about the file information, it's a good resource for that. But otherwise, it's not one that I use a ton of. But stay tuned, because in the future episode where I talk about LastTools, I'll give you some more information on LastLook then. So that's all I've really got to say about it for now. And now we're going to get to the one that is my daily driver, the one that I use the most, and that is POTRE Desktop or POTRE Viewer. It's available here. You can compile it, and it's a fantastic resource for being able to interact with this data and utilize it. So I'm going to just add it here. This does require that you allow it to create some ancillary files. So there is a cost on your hard drive for being able to deal with these files so efficiently. To give you an idea of what that scale is like, it basically has to unzip it to effectively an LAS. So we go from 289 megabytes for the LAZ up to 1.5 gigabytes to be able to interact with that file in POTRE Viewer. So there's definitely a cost, but for my mind, the ability to interact with this data so smoothly, well, there we go, interact with it so smoothly, have it look so natural, be able to work with it, it's hard to beat. Now, this is a pretty busy viewer, so there's a lot of features here. There's a lot going on. I could turn this to high quality, and I could pump our point budget way up and probably make it a little bit slower, but that's okay. Everything you do, though, comes down to here. So when you select the point cloud itself, that's when you're going to get prompted to be able to change the attributes. So that's a critical thing, because if you click on measurements, you're not going to see, well, how do I change this from RGB? You have to be selecting the point cloud of interest. You can have multiples loaded, as you've seen me do previously, which is a really nice feature. We're going to go to our classification. Again, you've seen me draw profiles now, but this is how you actually do it. So let's see here. I drew across here last time. Let's go across the Centennial Building. So left click to start, draw across your area of interest, left click to end, and then right click to close it. And you see that the profile has been created down here. If I select that profile, I could say show 2D profile. And then we get all of that information. And it's just a fantastic viewer, really good visual fidelity. I don't have any issues. I can change these colors if I want to. I can adjust the number of returns. So if I just want to see all my first returns, I can do that. It just, the flexibility that this tool affords is pretty massive. The point source IDs, I can change my timing if I wanted to. There's a lot of different things that you can do with this and not have to worry. There's a lot of different things you can do to clip it as well. So this is not going to actually cut it out, but it would let you limit your area of interest. So let's say that I was just interested there. Then I kind of have to zoom around. Okay, so we're good there. So let's say inside any, and we're going to just say inside. And our profile is being selected as well because it's treated the same way. But I can turn our profile off and I can actually delete it and then it goes away. So you see now that we're just interacting with the area within that volume that I selected. So you can actually isolate areas of interest if you're trying to tell a story or you're trying to understand it. You can also use different flight tools. I haven't experimented with these a lot, honestly. I typically just stay in this sort of navigation cube because it makes the most sense to me. But you absolutely can interact with it in other ways. Top down, you've got all sorts of predefined view angles here. So I would highly encourage you to check out POTRE Viewer and POTRE Desktop. It really makes it easy to interact with the data sets, and it makes it so that you don't have to be a LiDAR expert to start to dive into LiDAR data and at least start getting some information out of it. You don't have to be a GIS whiz. It's drag and drop. You let it compute, and away you go. So that's everything I wanted to introduce for viewers. Again, I'll leave this here for one moment so that folks can write down any of these addresses, check them out. All of them are fantastic, and all of them are free. So what doesn't cost you anything to give any of these a shot and see what you think. With that in mind, tune in tomorrow for an introduction to area-based forest inventory. Thank you very much for listening.